What's going on? I just finished recording this episode with Morgan. It's one of those episodes we get into a few different things. It's always pretty fun talking to different esports people in the space. If you're into working at upper management and esports organizations, this is definitely the one for you. We talk about a few things marketing, a few things operations in esports, how to grow the brand that you're working for, things like that. I guess another thing to quickly note is we had a slight audio bug in probably two or three parts of it. So apologies for that. If you could bear with it, it's really not that bad, but you let me know if you listen to these episodes and you've made it this far on my podcast journey and you haven't left a review on iTunes or followed on Spotify or subscribed on YouTube or whatever it is. I'd really appreciate it if you do, if you come back here on a weekly basis and check these out. I'm looking to start, or I guess, if you leave a review on iTunes, I like to read those on the podcast or whatever it is, if it's a comment or anything. I guess questions you could also put at the After Hours podcast on Twitter. We like to read those off during interviews as well. So, I guess with all that being said, here's the episode. Have a great day. Hello and welcome to episode number 20 of the After Hours podcast. Here with me today, I have the newly announced Director of Marketing and Business Development for Armada, Morgan Copeland. Thanks for coming on, dude.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm super excited.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into some cool things here. Why don't you go ahead and start off with giving a little bit of background information on what you do, what you've done, and give the quick rundown of your experience.
Yeah, for sure. I'm 21 years old. I live in Georgia, right outside of Atlanta. I'm currently a full-time college student playing college baseball, and then obviously working on Armada at the moment. When I first got into esports, it started off very low end. So just networking a ton, working with very, very small teams. My first noticeable organization I was a part of was Hype Unit. And I was with Hype from the beginning of December 2018 till about a week and a half ago. In Hype, when I first came in, it was a pretty much a Call of Duty team. So we had, sniping and a few YouTube uploads here and there. And then we kind of switched the direction of how we wanted Hype to look. So over those 11 months, we did some really good work. And now I'm currently with Armada. And like I said, I'll be doing the marketing and business development with Armada. And I'm super excited to be working with those guys.
Cool. Yeah. So, I think I've talked to a couple marketing people that work for more of a marketing agency versus like a marketing position within an esports organization. So what does that typically look like on a day-to-day basis? For you as the head of marketing, what does your day-to-day kind of look like?
Yeah, marketing is a big piece of esports, especially when the industry is so saturated with new organizations. So you have to really be picky about what you're wanting your brand to look like, right? And so that's kind of what I'm seeing, what I'm going to be overseeing at Armada. So my job will pretty much be to adhere to the brand identity, get the brand in front of as many people as possible, and just grow the brand presence on social media. And then obviously, once you get the digital side done, then you want to kind of move into the more physical face-to-face interactions with the fans and different communities. So we're doing a lot of work in Denver currently, with different venues out of Denver. And obviously we just recently announced the Armada Academy, which we have some Fortnite players in the Denver area who are representing the brand, and we're going to use them in really good ways and help them grow and help the brand grow. So that's kind of how the marketing entails. And obviously it fades into sales and apparel All that sort of stuff kind of rolls into it, but that's kind of my everyday duties, is just making sure the brand identity is intact and always growing.
Yeah. Now I remember, I think I saw somewhere the Armada Academy. I think I don't remember where I saw it, but I guess tell me a little bit about that. What does that look like? What are your plans with the academy? Obviously, I don't know how much is public, but whatever you can get into, you know, tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so with the academy, one of the things with Armada that we're really wanting to get into is build a strong connection with the Denver community. And obviously, with Fortnite being as popular and as big as it is right now, it's really important for us to kind of get a foothold in the Denver area, um, with Fortnite. Now, obviously these young kids that are in the Denver area and all across the world, really, you know, they're becoming better and better at these games. And Fortnite is one of those games where age isn't really a factor, right? You can be 13 years old and you can be the best in the world, or you can be 35 years old and you can be the best in the world. So our academy team really focuses on the Denver youth, and we're partnered with a venue out of Denver, that holds all of these players, so they're able to go there and practice, scrim. We hold events there for different titles, and with our academy team, we're really just integrating our brand into the community, getting together with the youth of the community who are interested in esports and gaming, and really just nurturing them up and teaching them different skills that they need to be successful in the esports industry.
Yeah, that sounds like, definitely a good. It's good to have that, stepping stone option. Not necessarily that an academy is meant to be a stepping stone. It's mostly there. I feel like for the younger, you know, players to have a place to grow. I feel like, probably 5 years ago. I guess that's probably how long I've been in the space. 5 or so years ago, that wasn't as big of a thing. Like academies weren't really, around, and if they were, they really weren't thought out. There wasn't really a process to it. It was more just like we need another team. We'll call them the academy team. Um, but I think a well put together academy system will be really good for the youth of the incoming esports players to be.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a great way for the community to kind of understand it a little bit more as well, because you're not only interacting with the youth of the community, but you're interacting with their parents, right? And
Yeah,
the people who are very successful in the community, and if you can help them understand the esports scene in any way possible, and especially once you're building this form of infrastructure and education and training for their kids, it really helps them latch on, which obviously, if we can help people understand our industry better, then it helps the overall industry.
yeah, for sure. Um, so I guess going back a little bit, we touched on it a little bit that you used to be part of Hype Unit. That's I think I mentioned before how I got to know you at the extent that we know each other.
Yeah.
So what exactly did you do there? Same kind of thing that you're doing now, or was it a little bit different?
Yeah. So with Hype, pretty much my title was COO, so I was over operations. Um, Pretty much myself and Christopher Dixon, who is the general manager over at Hype Unit, we worked on anything related to business partnerships, esports, um, you know, sales, anything that fell under marketing, business development, esports partnerships, that was under us. Um, so, like I say, it was a lot to kind of handle. But with Chris and myself, we had a pretty successful run in Hype. We did a lot of really, really good things, and I'm proud with how it ended up. Um, but yeah, like I said, it was just kind of anything that had to do anything aside from content is really what I handled.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I know um, during your time at Hype, you guys kind of were one of, if not the first teams that brought Papa John's into the esports community. How exactly did that happen? And what did
Yeah,
that relationship look like?
it's actually a funny story. So I'm a big advocate for non-endemics getting into the space because I think it's really important for them, and at the end of the day, it's pretty simple, right? They just want to see what they want to see. So when you're pitching these non-endemics, you don't want to show them all this sort of information that's deep diving into the esports scene, or these really in-depth analytics, right? They just want to see, if we give you X, will you produce Y?
Right.
And so with Papa John's, it's actually funny how we kind of got in contact with them. So one day I was just on Twitter. I think I was in a Discord call with a few guys from Hype, and I just decided to put out a tweet and pretty much say, like, Hype unit and Papa John's would be pretty cool. And then like 5 minutes later, I got a response from the Papa John's Twitter account that said, maybe you should DM us. And I was like, oh. And then I ended up messaging them. And then I went through a chain of kind of their upper management in the North American region. It probably took a month and a half for us to kind of get all the deals or all the details ironed out. But pretty much I know a few years ago they did something with some of the larger brands like Cloud9 and a couple others. They had some sort of a website reward system.
Yeah.
But they hadn't done anything in a few years, so it was kind of new to them, but they were very interested in the scene. So we were the only brand, aside from the Orlando Magic's esports organization, we were the only brand that had a national deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
The Las Vegas Minigunners have a deal with them as well, but theirs is only for the Las Vegas area.
Right.
But yeah, I was doing a lot of work with the director of marketing for the North American region for Papa John's. We were in contact a ton with them, and they give us X, and we produce content that's meant in the East. And I'm like Hype Unit has idea. We have a really good presence of brand identity and how we do things. So it made sense for us to go with a brand like Papa John's. And, all in all, it was a really good partnership for them. It was a really good partnership for us. So I think it turned out really well.
Yeah, it was cool to see. I'm right there with you as supporting non-endemics coming into the space, because for one, it helps, I guess, the right partnerships will help legitimize the esports community as a whole. I mean, I think the past couple of years have shown that it's a pretty legit industry. But seeing a Papa John's come in, and like if you look at the Overwatch League, there's a lot of non-endemics working in there, and like League of Legends, there's a lot of non-endemics in there. But it's definitely, it helps legitimize the space, and it was definitely really cool to see them come in and see what that marketing activations look like, what the marketing activations looked like between you guys and them. And that, I mean, the way you got connected with them, I think is super interesting. It's one of those like, it probably won't work, but screw it, I'll try it anyway. And then you go and do it, and that led to a pretty good relationship from what it seems.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, anytime or you think of something, it's probably 80-20, like it's 80% not going to work, but 20% like it may, like go ahead and shoot your shot, right? Because like I didn't think when I tweeted at Papa John's that I would end up getting partnered with Papa John's, right? But it happened, and it was by far the biggest partnership that Hype has. So it's if I would have never sent that tweet, right, we would never have Papa John's, and who knows where Hype would have been, right? Because that Papa John's did wonders for us. It opened us. But like I said, for anybody that's listening to this, like, if you ever have an idea or you think you may have some sort of a shot, like go ahead and reach out, because once they no or not respond, like then you're at the same place you started. So, but yeah.
No, I agree. It was it Wayne Gretzky that said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take?
Somebody like that.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's the worst thing that happens, like you said, is they say no and you're on to the next person. It's definitely one way to get to where you're trying to be, because if nobody knows you want to work with them, then nobody's going to want to work with you.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man, is like, Papa John's wasn't the first non-endemic that I reached out to either. Right. I probably went through 60, 70 companies non-endemic wise that I was trying to get in contact with. None of them would respond, or I got 4 or 5 responses, and then I lucked up with Papa John. So all it takes is one, and as soon as you have that first non-endemic, like, it just multiplies the brand image on social media. So yeah, it wasn't a one shot and I made it. It was 60, 70 tries, and I got lucky on one, and it worked out.
Yeah. Sounds like it was a fun project for sure. So you coming on to our Armada, I guess bringing it back to the present here. What are your goals in coming on to Armada? Like, what is, for, I guess, both for the Armada brand and for your, like, your personal career in esports? Like, what are your long-term goals? What would you like to see done in esports and such?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've been in contact with the guys at Armada, Jodan and Riley, for quite some time now. When I first came into Hype, they were one of the teams that I knew we were competing on, especially in the Smite scene.
Mm-hmm.
So, I started reaching out to those guys. So we've been talking for months, right? And they have a really good foundation as to how they do things and how things are ran. And, for me coming on, I spoke with Jodan and Riley quite a few times about this, but, the brand image of the company is by far the selling point. Company, any partnership, any player. So that's my number one goal. We want over the next 6 months to grow the brand image and the engagements and the sales and anything I can do to push the brand across new faces and new people. That's my goal. Because, especially in the Denver community, because we want to get that foothold in the Denver side and in the Colorado area. So anything that we can kind of do to push our brand in the Denver community and across social media is going to be big. So that means, we're looking into a couple new titles going into 2020 to compete in. We're looking at the top influencers, top creators, because we want to make sure that, we're bringing on the best content possible, so our fans and our followers have that quality, consistent entertainment. And like I said, we want to, with us bringing people on, and we want to make sure that we're bringing on people who have parallel goals that are mine. And that's the key part of it, because a lot of these organizations will just bring people on for nothing, or because they have a certain, reputation behind their name. But for us, we want to really make sure that we're bringing on people who are in it for the long run, people who understand what we're about, and people who, match with what we're. So yeah, like I said, I think the next 6 to 12 months for Armada is going to be a big growing point. I think some people are going to be very surprised at what we bring and what we're able to accomplish. But like I said, after speaking with Jodan and Riley, I knew that Armada was the perfect fit for me, and I'm super excited.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I just found this out on this call right here that you're going there. But I've known of the Armada brand for a while. I think, from what I know about you and what you've done in the scene prior, I think it's definitely a good fit. I feel like I've kept up with the Armada brand probably at an arm's length, just through being in the space, and I think that's a good fit. I think it'll now I'm more curious to see what the growth looks like of the brand, just because I know you, so that should be pretty cool to watch, for sure. So I know obviously Armada is not of the Call of Duty League, but it's been a pretty hot topic here in the esports space here recently. It's come up in most of my podcasts over the past few episodes at least. What are your thoughts on franchising as a whole? What are your thoughts on what that Call of Duty League will look like, and what the future of Call of Duty looks like as a whole?
Obviously, as soon as the CDL was announced and as soon as all these teams started announcing their rosters and branding, they're under a lot of heat, right? You see more negative things about it than you do positive, at least from my point of view. But, I spoke with Jeremy Poor, who is the director of partnerships for the Atlanta Reign and the Atlanta Call of Duty, or the Atlanta Phase now. I spoke with him quite a few times about this because I was trying to understand franchising a little bit more, and kind of what are the benefits? Like, why are you spending $40 million on a league spot when you know you don't really know the return, right? For me, franchising does a few things, right? So first off, it integrates the city fan base, which people are used to. It integrates that into esports.
Yeah.
And obviously with Overwatch and Call of Duty, those are two massive titles in the esports scene. So I think them starting the franchising out is a big deal. And like I said, I'm super excited to see how the cities, Minnesota and Los Angeles and Dallas and Atlanta, I'm excited to see how these um, communities actually support these teams, right? And I think it'll be a really surprising impact for a lot of the quote unquote everyday esports consumers, because we're used to everything being so digital, right? And at times, esports gets to where it's hating on traditional sports, right? Because traditional sports is done one way, esports is done another. They can't merge. I think it can be done both ways, right?
Yeah.
Because you can be digital, right? Digital is great. Like people can go to Instagram, whatever, and watch you play. Like that's awesome. You're traveling the world. That's great. But if you're able to go to or your city that you're representing and play in a stadium that has thousands of fans supporting you, wearing your logo, screaming your name, like that's pretty incredible. And I don't think esports has seen that yet, right? You go to these different tournaments and you see like the Cloud9 supporters, the TSMs and the Envies. But what if you go to, let's say they have the Atlanta homestand, right, for Call of Duty next year. You go and you see 50,000 people in a stadium, phase diehard Atlanta fans, right? And it's going to bring in the Falcons fans. It's going to bring in the Braves, different aspects to it, just supporting Atlanta. And I think that's a cool part of it. So another thing it does, it just bridges the gap between esports and the mainstream media, right? Because I think these traditional investors, they are to get in with these spots than they would going to, let's say, Armada and just investing $30 million. So I think it bridges that gap, which I think is going to be super important. And like I said, for everybody saying that there's no return in franchising, nobody's going to spend 30 plus million on a franchise spot if they know that there isn't a guarantee of return. So obviously they know something that we don't, whether it's media, brand deals, whatever the case may be, there's something going on that they know there's going to get a return. But I'm excited to see it, man. I'm excited to see how 2020 rolls out. I've been super impressed of how the Overwatch League is done. I know viewership was down a little bit this season. But I think if they can find a way to bridge the gap and really capitalize and market their teams, I think it's going to be really impressive. And I think it's going to be a good move for the esports team.
Yeah, no, I agree, pretty much with just about everything you said. I think, rolled over my mic there. Esports is obviously a growing industry, and I feel, before franchising came around, I feel like there was a growth that people maybe started to look at it and think, if this starts to grow too much, how do we contain it? There was not necessarily, or I guess the conversation used to be that the esports industry is a bubble, and I guess it still kind of is a bubble. And when it gets to a point where it pops and everything kind of explodes, nobody knows what to do. I guess what I'm thinking is franchising is step one of starting to actually, build some structure into these leagues. Because right now, prior to 2017 or 2018, there really wasn't any structured franchises. So it was more like the creator, the developer of the game put on a tournament, or some tournament organizer put on a tournament, or put together a league on a yearly basis, or whatever it is. People played, people won money, and people went to the next event. It was like obviously there's more to it, but there there's nothing there isn't long-term structure in that. I think franchising coming around and putting, especially the thing I'm most excited about is putting a brand to a city. Watching the Overwatch League pretty closely the first year, it was definitely really cool to see, your Houston fans be diehard fans of the Outlaws, your Dallas fans being diehard fans of the Fuel, your LA fans being diehard fans of the Gladiators and the Valiant and so on. So I'm hoping that kind of, once people get past the fact that XYZ player used to be Optic or XYZ player used to be FaZe or United or whatever it is, and they get to, start to build some type of rapport with their local or closest city that has a Call of Duty team. I think, as time goes on and new people come in, it'll feel more diehard. It'll feel more like a sporting event. Especially like you mentioned at a homestand with 50,000 people screaming or however many people go. I think, I'm excited for this long term. Obviously, there'll be growing pains, just like anything. But as time goes on, I think franchising as a whole is going to be a huge, huge move, especially for people looking to work in the esports space.
Yeah, and one other thing I kind of want to touch on is, I don't know if you remember back when the whole Tfue versus FaZe thing went down. But one of the big topics through that was there's really no, union or kind of support or anything that kind of protects these players, right? It's easy for a player in a league to kind of get screwed over, especially when they're younger, that don't really understand the contracts. I think with this franchising, it's going to iron all of that out, because I think there's going to be a standard that's going to be set with how players are treated, how contracts are made, how contracts are ran. And I think, that's just like an extra benefit of it. I think it's going to benefit the players long term.
Yeah.
The CDL pops off, or if it doesn't, I think it's going to set a standard that organizations across the world are going to have to abide by, and I think that's going to ultimately, end up in the players' favor.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure. I guess at the end of my rant, I didn't think to continue this at all, but at the end of what I was saying, aside from supporting the players, like this opens up a lot of work opportunities for people who are interested in getting in the space. If you're at a point right now where you're interested in, for one, graphic design, because there's tons of new organizations that are coming around and brands that are going to need that support. But even things like day-to-day type management or coordination of teams and working with players and player managers and things like that, that opportunity is growing right now with all these teams announcing and coming out, and obviously the brands are out at this point for the CDL, but that's just the start. Gears of War might franchise in a couple of years. I think CS:GO said that they won't, but there will be other games that franchise, and there'll be teams that are around, and they'll be like your New York Yankees that need a staff. You don't run that type of organization at that capacity that spends $30 million or whatever they spent to get into their league, and then expect it to be ran with a skeleton crew. Eventually you have a pretty large staff. So I'm excited for there to be so many more opportunities to work in the space. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of uneducated, or maybe not uneducated, but underqualified people coming into the space, and there'll be that, growing pain that there is, like I said before, with anything. But there's definitely, now is the time. If you are connected with anybody in the space, you're at you're leaps and bounds ahead of somebody who's interested at, an arm's length and knows nobody in esports. So, I would say at this point, start building your connections in the esports space, and opportunities will come up if you're looking to actually make this a full-time career.
Yeah, for sure. I think it opens up tons of opportunity. And like you were saying, network now, because, a lot of these people who run these organizations and these people who are in these CDL spots, they are willing to talk with whoever puts in the effort to reach out to them. Jeremy Poor is a great example. I love that guy. He's he's invested tons of time into me and taught me so much. And he didn't have to do that, but everybody in the esports scene that I've ran across, they want to see the betterment of the industry, and if that means sharing information with you about how they went through things and details on how to do certain things, how not to do certain things, like I haven't ran across one person who has been stingy and not giving information. So I think networking is extremely easy in this scene.
Oh yeah.
I think you just have to put in the work behind it. To.
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess the other thing to piggyback off that, I'm not sure how connected he is in the space prior to franchising and all that, but there are a lot of people. A lot of the money that's coming in is not directly related to the esports space. Like there's people like Hector Rodriguez and Hastro and those guys that come in and are bringing money in, but there are people who are just putting money in and don't necessarily have somebody to guide them. So those types of people are probably more interested in just picking your brain and gaining that knowledge of esports, obviously through connection building and growing a relationship with them could be what leads you to, or anybody to a future career, either with that organization or through a connection that person has. And connections are just very interesting, because you never know where X, Y, and Z could lead you through a mutual friend or a business acquaintance or whatever it may be. So definitely, I would definitely recommend building that connection base out yesterday.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Franchising is always a fun thing to talk about. Oh, you know what? I start off every podcast. Clearly, I didn't this episode. I start off every podcast with the question that is, what was your first encounter with the space? Not like your first job, not your first thing that you did, but the first time you heard about the esports community. Sorry for doing this a little bit ass backwards, but I have to ask that question.
No, you're good, man. Wow, this would be a while ago. I would have to say it. The last one I can remember, the very first thing I can remember about esports, and it's very vague, but I come from the Call of Duty community, so the Call of Duty sniping. So like 2011, 2012, like I was grinding Modern Warfare 2.
Yeah.
14 hours a day, like let's go, right?
Hell
Middle
yeah.
school days, like let's go. And I would say the first experience I remember ever about esports was when FaZe entered into the esports. I can't remember what team they picked up first or how they went about it, but I remember early on when they started getting into the scene, and then you had all these other quote unquote Call of Duty teams starting to get into more competitive style gaming. That's when I started to notice it. And as soon as I caught on to it and realized what was happening, like I was full force, like let's go. And obviously with esports, there's a ton that changes every year with new titles coming out, leagues being formed, players getting switched around, new players coming into the scene. It's hard to catch up and know everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say my first experience would probably be FaZe. And I could be completely wrong. I could just be like daydreaming right now. But I believe it was when I can't remember what team they picked up.
Yeah. Now, I guess to piggyback and further that a little bit, what was your first, experience working in the space? Whether it was, just not necessarily working where you were getting paid or anything like that, or like it was your first organization you started or you competed or whatever. What did that first, actual interaction look like?
Yeah, I would have to say it was Rival. So there's a team. It was a Call of Duty team called Rival Ambitions. This was probably back in like 2016, 2017, maybe.
Yeah.
And I was going around, like I couldn't get into any esports organization, and like nobody wanted me. I was still young, or younger. So I started going around to these Call of Duty teams, pretty much saying like, hey, like let me come and pretty much build up an esports side. Like, let me recruit teams. Like, let's do all this, LLC, all that fun stuff. And so we end up, I get into Rival Ambitions, which was a really respected Call of Duty team at the time. Funny, the first thing we did with esports wise, we picked up a Fortnite squad, a PC Fortnite squad, and actually the captain of that squad was Kasid, who was in TSM.
Mm-hmm.
So Kasid was my very first recruitment / signing in the esports scene. Like my first time doing anything with esports, like I signed Kasid, and obviously at that point he wasn't the Kasid he is now.
Right.
But it's cool just kind of looking back and be like, you know, that first encounter with signing a player is one of the best Fortnite players in the world. Was on one of the best organizations in the world, and it's pretty cool just looking back and seeing that.
Yeah, no, that's definitely pretty cool. You know, like obviously not everybody gets to have that kind of diamond in the rough type of luck, or maybe it's not luck. Maybe you knew something. Not to discredit you at all, but
it was probably luck.
Yeah, but I mean, looking at it, whether it was or wasn't, it's pretty cool to look, you know, at how far he as a player has come and how, you know, your relationship started with them. Yeah, that's pretty cool for sure. Definitely. Sorry, like I said before, sorry we did this little ass backwards, but yeah. Cool. So I covered, you know, just about all the topics I had. Was there anything that, you know, we breezed over too quickly or that we didn't get to bring up that you know, felt the need to get off your chest?
I don't think so. We kind of went over everything. Yeah, like I said, I'm just super excited to get to work with Armada.
Yeah.
And, you know, the guys over at Hype Unit, I know, you know, people have been asking, like, what happened. And, you know, I can't go into detail with anything, but, you know, I still wish the guys over at Hype the best. I actually have, like, 50-something of their jerseys sitting in my house right now.
Damn.
So I got to get that delivered. But like I said, you know, for anybody listening and wondering what happened with me and Hype, like, you know, some things are just better left unsaid, and I still think Hype's a great organization, but, you know, for me at this point in time, it was better for me to go join Armada. And like I said, I'm excited to watch both of them grow. I'm super excited to work with Joe, Don, and Riley at Armada, and I think we're gonna do some really cool things in 2020.
Cool. Yeah. As am I. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with them for sure. As we wrap up here, I think the shameless plug portion of the podcast is arguably the most important. So if people are interested in talking to you more or reaching out about Armada or have any basic esports questions or anything like that, what's the best place to get a hold of you?
Yeah, see, the best place would probably be my Twitter, so it's at xcopeless. Or you can reach me at my email, so it's cope@armada.g. Either one of those, feel free to reach out. I usually respond within the first 24 hours. Sometimes, I'm sure you know, the DMs can get flooded pretty quickly.
Yes.
Like I said, feel free to reach out to me. I love to talk and spread news and just interact with as many people as possible. So feel free to reach.
Cool. So what I gathered there is flood the man's inbox and yeah, tell him what you think about
Pretty
what he's doing. Cool. Yeah. Well, you know, thank you for coming on. I'm glad we got to talk more in depth about, you know, your history and all that. I think this will be pretty fun. But as always, you know, if you have made it this far and you haven't liked, commented, subscribed, or whatever it is on the platform that you listen to, please do so. That helps me out, helps me get the podcast seen by, you know, more and more people. And leave a review if you haven't. That'd be great too. But you know, I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.